the idea that questions are becoming more valuable than answers, it seems kind of counterintuitive, but it's actually an idea that's being really embraced these days in Silicon Valley and other areas of other centers of innovation. And the reason why is if you look at a lot of the innovations and breakthroughs today, and you trace them back, as I did in my research, to their origin, a lot of times what you find at the root of it all is a great question, a beautiful question. A great definition I saw for questioning is that questioning enables us to organize our thinking around what we don't know. So in a time when so much knowledge is all around us, answers are at our fingertips, we really need great questions in order to be able to know what to do with all that information and find our way to the next answer.
The real joy for me is that I can take things that are already familiar to you, and by sharing the story of how I've learned to look at them, you can see those things you've been seeing a little differently. So I talk about curiosity-driven research as questions that we try to answer. Why is that tree growing successfully in that place, but never in that place? That's a curiosity question. It's the kind of question a little kid could come up with. Why don't we have those trees at our house? Now, buried in the answer might be something that could give us better fruit someday that we can sell in the marketplace and feed hungry people with. But that result, that application to growing food for people, is buried several steps below that answer. My part of that is to look at that first answer. What is that tree? What does it do? Why is it there? And we call that the curiosity-driven piece because that answer will be basically turned over to other experts who know how that might play out into something that is important for the marketplace. But there's no substitute for that first step, for that little kid question.
The research, a 4-year-old girl is asking like as much as 300 questions a day. And when kids go into school, you see this steady decline that happens as they go through the grade levels, to the point where questioning in schools by junior high school is almost at zero. There are a lot of reasons why questioning declines as we get older. But one of the key issues is that in schools, we really value the answers, and there is almost no value placed on asking a good question. In fact, the teachers now are so stressed to teach to the test and to cover so much material that they really can't even entertain a lot of questions even if they want to. So it becomes a real problem in our school system, in our education system. I think people are starting to address it, try to deal with it. In my research, I found a number of teachers, schools that are trying to place more emphasis on questioning.
I often start any project by asking a naive question. So naive that most likely you asked these sorts of questions when you were a child, but at a certain age you learned that these were not appropriate. Or even if you asked them to yourself, you never really followed through to try to see what would happen if you were to do something that was kind of patently absurd. But we can still, for our own sake, the back of our mind, ask those sorts of questions and let them play out. We can fully develop them. And even if it's only in our own mind that we are fully developing them, that process can take us to something that is more concrete, something that is more actionable in an adult, responsible world, that we don't really need to say we came to it through that naive question.
You know, someone asking, why isn't someone doing this? What if someone tried to do that? So I found that questions are often at the root of innovation. And that's why, you know, in Silicon Valley these days, they're actually saying, you know, questions are the new answers. But at the same time, you know, it's important to note that questions aren't just important to innovators or tech people. They're a survival skill for all of us. And that becomes even more true in a time of dynamic change. I mean, we've got so much that we have to adapt to. we have to solve problems, we have to deal with change, uncertainty, and questioning is the tool that, or one of the primary tools that lets you do that.
We are social creatures, hierarchical creatures, and we don't want to shame ourselves, humiliate ourselves. But recognizing that, by zigging when everyone else is zagging, with that particular context, you can actually develop a superpower, and that is asking dumb questions. And this came up repeatedly when I was interviewing incredible performers, world-class performers, meaning investors, entrepreneurs, writers, you name it, for Tools of Titans, the new book. And asking dumb questions can take many forms. I'll give you a few examples. Malcolm Gladwell is very good at asking so-called dumb questions. And he learned that from his father, who was a mathematician, had no intellectual insecurities whatsoever, just did not care about looking stupid. And he would constantly ask, or he would first say, I don't understand. Please explain that. I don't understand. Can you explain that? I don't understand. Can you explain that? And he would literally, he might ask that 10 times in a row. If you look across all of the icons, titans, world-class performers that I've interviewed in the, say, wealthy section, right? If we're dividing them into healthy, wealthy, and wise, we look at the business side of things. One of the most common patterns that you spot is absurd questions. And the power of the absurd question is really something that I've paid a lot of attention to in the last few years. Those types of questions, I think, are, whether it's 10x thinking, 100x, however you frame that, it could also be a constraint. For instance, if you had to accomplish all of your work or grow your company 2x while working 2 hours a week, if you had a gun against your head, how would you attempt to do that? These type of absurd questions don't allow you to use your default frameworks for solutions. They don't allow you to use your base of current assumptions to come up with answers. It forces you to think laterally. It forces you to break some of the boundaries on the sphere of comfort that you've created for yourself. And that is what makes them, I think, in a way, so powerful. And these are not questions, by the way, I think are valuable if you ponder them for 10 seconds and go, yeah, maybe I would do this, and then move on with your day. I think that journaling as an adjunct to asking these questions is very, very important. So I will sit down very often in the morning. One of my rituals, also borrowed from a lot of these people, is morning journaling of some type. And I tend to use either morning pages, 5-minute journal, or just a separate type of freehand sort of goal dissection. And this would be a case where I would ask one of those questions and I would write freehand for, say, 3 pages, 3 to 5 pages, and drink some tea as I'm doing it. And that is when you will not only come up with interesting ideas, and there might be 90% garbage, but if you have 10% that leads you in an interesting direction, that could completely revolutionize your business or your life if you take that seed and do something with it. And that's been the case for me for a very long time. The asking of dumb questions can certainly apply to exploring any topic or interviewing. So Alex Bloomberg, who's co-founder of Gimlet Media, which has a slew of gigantic podcast hits, just a factory for podcast blockbusters. He was the co-creator of Planet Money, which is a very successful radio and podcast show. And for instance, during the subprime economic crisis, he asked the question that no one else seemed to be asking, but it was just sitting right in front of millions of people who couldn't quite figure out what the hell happened. And it was, why would banks lend money to people who stand next to no chance of paying it back? And so very often, the dumb question that is sitting right there that no one seems to be asking is the smartest question you can ask. Not only is it the smartest, most incisive, but if you want to ask it and you're reasonably smart, I guarantee you there are other people who want to ask, they're just embarrassed to do so. And in this case, if you can override that embarrassment and be the one who asks dumb questions, you can end up having best-selling books. You can end up having a huge blockbuster of a podcast, or many. You could end up picking the next Uber. It is a superpower. In a world that is governed by shame and perhaps political correctness, more and more so, people are not saying what's on their mind. They're not asking what's on their mind. And the questions here are the most powerful.
Get smarter faster with new videos every week from the world's biggest thinkers.